Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the power of thought and self-improvement.
Okay.
And all this is going to be based on the writings of James Allen.
Interesting.
Now, he's a bit of a mystery, this James Allen.
Really?
Even though his work is powerful, we don't really know much about him as a person.
Huh.
Almost like he let his ideas do the talking for him. We've got a few of his works here to guide us today.
Okay.
Complete works of James Allen,
Okay.
As a Man Thinketh, and Byways to Blessedness.
It's amazing how little information there is about his life.
Yeah,
It really is. Kind of adds to the intrigue a bit.
it does.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if he really lived what he preached.
Yeah.
But you know enough about the man. Let's dive into the ideas.
Okay.
So Allen's central point is that our thoughts are like seeds.
Okay.
Plant good thoughts and you'll reap good outcomes.
Right.
Plant bad ones and, well, you get the idea.
Yeah, he uses this analogy. Corn nettles yield nettles. Simple, but it really gets you thinking. It's not just about our actions being influenced by our thoughts, but our thoughts actually shaping our reality.
Okay. So how does that work in real life? I mean, it can't be as easy as just thinking happy thoughts and everything magically becomes perfect.
No, of course not. But there is a powerful connection between our thoughts and our experiences.
Yeah.
It's like what they call self-fulfilling prophecies in psychology.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed if you think you're going to fail at something, you probably will.
Oh, yeah.
You avoid the risks, you give up easily because deep down you just don't think you can succeed.
I've definitely been there.
Yeah,
So by that same logic, if you believe in yourself and you're positive about things, you're more likely to get what you want.
exactly. It's like a feedback loop. When you believe in yourself, you're more likely to try harder, stick with it when things get tough, and reach your goals.
Right.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a good way.
That's powerful stuff. But what about things that we can't control? Like, Alan can't really believe that we're in control of everything that happens to us.
He actually says that directly. He argues that while we may not always control what happens to us, we can control how we react. This is where self-control comes in.
Yeah.
It's a major thing in his work.
He seems to believe that mastering our thoughts and emotions is the real key to achieving lasting success and happiness. Not, money or fame or any of those external things that we're always chasing after.
That's right. Allen argues that real wealth and happiness lie in things like virtue and inner peace, not in material possessions or status. He sees self-control as the master key to unlocking that inner potential.
Right.
He talks about conquering those like slavish animal indulgences that hold us back,
Right.
like excessive desires, negative emotions, or even just a lack of discipline.
Yeah. That really resonates with me. It's just so easy to get caught up in that stuff,
Yeah.
especially in our modern world with all its distractions.
It is.
But what does that actually look like? Like conquering those indulgences? It sounds really tough.
It can be, no doubt.
Yeah.
But Allen doesn't just throw out this vague idea. He gives real advice on how to develop self-control.
Okay.
Like he talks about setting clear intentions, building good habits, and practicing mindfulness to be more aware of our thoughts and impulses.
So it's not about, denying ourselves pleasure or becoming like some kind of monk.
No, not at all.
It's about consciously choosing how we want to live and what we want to focus on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads us to this other idea that Allen explores, the idea of surrender.
Okay.
He argues that real fulfillment doesn't come from clinging to our own selfish wants, but by surrendering to something bigger.
Surrender. That sounds a little counterintuitive. Isn't that kind of like giving up?
It's not about giving up on life.
Okay.
It's more about letting go of the ego's tight hold on how we think things should be.
Okay.
He uses this powerful metaphor to describe this.
Okay.
He talks about feeling like a prisoner in self-created purgatory when we cling too tightly to our desires and expectations.
So what's the alternative? How do we break free from this self-created prison?
It's about changing our focus from what's in it for me to a broader view.
Okay.
Maybe it means finding a spiritual practice, dedicating yourself to something bigger than yourself, or just learning to let go of the need to control everything.
This is getting pretty deep. It makes me wonder, how did Alan himself develop these ideas? Did he have some kind of specific spiritual background?
That's part of the mystery, isn't it?
Yeah.
We know he was very interested in Eastern philosophy and religion, especially Buddhism.
Okay.
But he also drew on Western traditions like Christianity and the Stoic philosophers.
Interesting.
Seems like he was always looking for truth and wisdom from everywhere he could.
And he was really into meditation, right? He saw it as a key practice for developing self-knowledge and connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
Yes, he does. He even compares meditation to what figures like Buddha and Jesus did. It
Wow.
shows just how universal that practice is.
Yeah.
Meditation, whether you call it prayer or contemplation or mindfulness,
Right.
has been a big part of spiritual traditions around the world for centuries.
Right.
It's about quieting the mind,
Yeah.
becoming aware of our thoughts and feelings, and cultivating a sense of inner peace and connection.
I have to admit, I've tried meditating before, but I've never been able to make it a habit.
Yeah,
It always feels like my mind races even faster when I try to quiet it down.
it is a practice.
Yeah.
And it takes time and patience to get good at it.
Right.
But even a few minutes each day can make a real difference.
Yeah.
The key is to come at it with curiosity and be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Don't judge yourself for having thoughts. Just notice them and let them go.
I'm going to give it another try. It sounds like something I could really benefit from, especially with everything we're talking about, like self-control and surrendering to something bigger.
I think you'll find it's worth it.
Yeah.
Alan himself said meditation was how to get a deep inner wisdom and strength.
That leads to another major theme in his work, the idea of love. He has this amazing quote: "He who loves can never want. The universe belongs to goodness, and it therefore belongs to the good man." It's powerful. But what does he mean by love here?
He's not talking about romantic love.
Right.
It's a bigger kind of love,
Right.
one that includes compassion, empathy, and a connection to everything.
I see.
He believes that love in its purest form is the ultimate source of power and abundance.
Okay.
It's about understanding that we are all connected and acting from a place of kindness and understanding.
And this kind of love leads to true fulfillment, even more than material possessions or achievements ever could.
That's his main argument.
Yeah.
He believed that by developing this love, we can tap into a joy and contentment that doesn't depend on anything outside of ourselves.
So it's not about denying ourselves pleasure or becoming some kind of ascetic.
No, not at all.
It's about consciously choosing how we want to live and what we want to focus on.
Exactly. And that leads us to this other idea that Alan explores, the idea of surrender.
Okay.
He argues that real fulfillment doesn't come from clinging to our own selfish wants, but by surrendering to something bigger.
Surrender. That sounds a little counterintuitive. Isn't that kind of like giving up?
It's not about giving up on life.
Yeah.
It's more about letting go of the ego's tight hold on how we think things should be.
Okay.
He uses this powerful metaphor to describe this.
Good.
He talks about feeling like a prisoner in self-created purgatory when we cling too tightly to our desires and expectations.
So what's the alternative? How do we break free from this self-created prison?
It's about changing our focus from what's in it for me to a broader view. Maybe it means finding a spiritual practice, dedicating yourself to something bigger than yourself, or just learning to let go of the need to control everything.
That brings us to another key idea from Alan, the byways to blessedness, which is the whole focus of his book by the same name. It sounds like some kind of roadmap to a better life.
It is.
Yeah.
And it connects to everything we've been talking about: self-control, surrender, and love.
Okay, so let's dig into those byways in part 2, this deep dive, and see what advice Alan has for actually putting these ideas into action. Okay, so we've talked about some pretty big concepts: self-control, surrender, love.
Right.
But what do those actually look like in our everyday lives?
Yeah.
This is where those byways to blessedness come in, right?
Exactly. Alan lays out several specific paths or byways in his book
Right.
that can lead us to a more fulfilling life. And they're all rooted in those core ideas we've been discussing.
Let's start with one that really resonates with me: the power of silence and solitude. You know, in our world where we're always connected, finding some quiet time can be tough.
It really can.
But Alan says it's crucial.
He believes that finding space for reflection is essential for growing spiritually and understanding ourselves. Think about it. How often do you actually disconnect from all the noise and information and just be with yourself?
Not nearly enough, I'll admit. It's like I'm almost afraid of what I might find if I actually slow down and listen to my own thoughts.
That's a common fear, actually. But Alan suggests that's where real transformation begins. Facing that fear and embracing those quiet moments. That's when we can truly connect with ourselves and hear our own wisdom, when we're not distracted by all the external noise.
And that connects back to the importance of meditation, right? He compares it to the practices of figures like Buddha and Jesus,
He does.
suggesting that seeking inner peace and connection is something people have been doing for centuries.
It is. It's a universal thing. Meditation is about quieting the mind, allowing ourselves to just be present in the moment. It's a skill that takes practice, but the benefits are worth it.
Okay, so silence and solitude are important. But Alan also talks about the importance of standing alone and self-reliance. That seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it? How can we be connected to something bigger than ourselves and also be fiercely independent?
It's not about isolating ourselves.
Okay.
It's more about developing an inner strength and a sense of self-trust that allows us to navigate the world without needing constant approval or validation from others.
It's like having that internal compass we talked about earlier.
Yes,
The
exactly.
one that guides us even when everyone else's opinions are swirling around us.
Precisely. And that's especially important in our modern world, where we're bombarded with messages about who we should be and what we should have.
It's like Alan knew this was coming. I bet he'd have a lot to say about our obsession with social media and instant gratification and the constant pursuit of pleasure.
You might say we've created a new kind of self-created purgatory,
Right.
where we're always chasing external validation instead of cultivating inner peace and contentment.
Which brings us to another powerful byway, forgiveness. He sees it as something liberating, a way to free ourselves from resentment and anger. Makes you wonder what he had to forgive in his own life.
We may never know the details of his personal life,
True.
but his writing shows a deep understanding of human nature, both the capacity for great love and great pain.
Yeah, holding on to grudges really only hurts us in the end, doesn't it?
It
It
does.
poisons our thoughts and our relationships, keeps us stuck in the past.
Forgiveness allows us to move forward with a lighter heart and a clearer mind. It's not about saying what someone did was okay.
Right.
It's about choosing to let go of the negative energy that's keeping us tied to the past.
And it's closely connected to the next byway he talks about sympathy. It's about seeing beyond our own limited view and understanding the experiences of other people.
Yes, sympathy is the antidote to prejudice and judgment. It allows us to connect with our shared humanity and see the world through a lens of compassion and understanding.
It's like that saying, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always.
Exactly. And this ties back to Alan's emphasis on love. It's about recognizing that we are all interconnected, even with those who might seem different from us.
And finally, Alan talks about the joy of accomplishment, but he's not talking about achieving some big, huge goal.
No.
It's more about finding satisfaction in the process of working towards something and overcoming challenges. Makes you wonder if he felt a sense of accomplishment in his own life, even though he wasn't super famous when he was alive.
Perhaps he found fulfillment in the act of writing itself, in sharing his insights with the world, even if it wasn't a huge audience at the time.
Yeah, and he reminds us that truth cannot be comprehended through reading, but only by correcting and converting one's character.
Powerful words.
It's about putting those principles into practice, not just understanding them in our heads.
Right, that's the real test, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one thing to read about self-control or forgiveness or the power of thought,
Right.
but actually putting those into practice in our daily lives, that's a whole other challenge.
He does give us very specific examples, though, like controlling our speech, our temper, and our desires.
He does. He even lays out 6 rules for training the will and mastering ourselves. What stood out to you for those rules?
One that really struck me was the idea of controlling our speech. He says our words have a lot of power, both to create and to destroy. Think about how often we say things without really thinking, to gossip or complain or criticize.
It is something to think about. It's a
Right.
good reminder to be mindful of what we say, not just for the sake of others,
Yeah,
but for our own inner peace as well.
exactly. And it ties back to that idea of self-control. It's not about never feeling angry or upset. It's about choosing how we express those feelings in a way that aligns with our values.
And then there's the rule about controlling our temper. Alan seemed to believe that anger and resentment are poisonous to the soul.
Yeah. He argues that anger doesn't just hurt our relationships with others, but also damages our own inner peace. It clouds our judgment, distorts our perception, and ultimately keeps us from living in alignment with our best selves. So it's not about never feeling anger. It's about learning to manage it in a healthy way.
Right. It's about knowing what triggers our anger and developing strategies for responding differently, more constructively.
And that leads us to the final rule, controlling our desires. This one seems especially hard in our culture where we're constantly told we need to buy more stuff and have more experiences.
Alan was aware of this challenge even back then. He warned us about getting caught up in chasing fleeting pleasures and material things. He said true happiness comes from cultivating contentment within ourselves.
So it's not about denying ourselves all pleasure, but about making conscious choices that align with our values and our long-term goals.
It's about knowing the difference between what we want and what we truly need. And understanding that real fulfillment doesn't come from having more things, but from finding inner peace and a sense of purpose.
He makes a bold statement about this. He says, Man is a master. If he were not, he could not act contrary to law. What do you think he means by law here?
It seems like he's talking about a universal moral law, a principle of right action that governs the universe. It's an idea that has been explored in philosophy and religion for a long time.
But for Alan, this isn't about blind faith, is it? He really emphasizes understanding these principles and applying them to our
He
lives.
does. He's calling for a conscious effort to live in harmony with a higher law.
He's advocating for self-mastery, but not in a harsh or punishing way.
Right.
It's about aligning our actions with our highest ideals, with what he calls truth.
That ties back to all those byways we've been discussing. He's not just giving us abstract ideas.
Right.
He's giving us practical steps for actually living a better life.
Yeah, he's reminding us that we don't have to wait for some big external change to happen to find happiness and fulfillment. We can start by making small intentional changes in our thoughts and actions right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It all comes back to corn yields. Corn nettles yield nettles.
Right.
What we focus on, what we cultivate within ourselves, that's what determines the quality of our lives.
And that brings us back to his emphasis on self-control. It's about recognizing those slavish animal indulgences, as he calls them,
Yes.
that keep us from reaching our full potential. He even gives us specific techniques for training our willpower and mastering our desires.
He does.
He reminds us that we have a choice in how we respond to life's challenges. We can either give in to our lower impulses, or we can cultivate those qualities that lead to true strength and fulfillment.
It's about becoming conscious creators of our own experience. And that's where his emphasis on meditation comes in.
Right.
He saw it as a powerful tool for developing self-awareness, for understanding how our minds work.
He even compares meditation to the practices of figures like Buddha and Jesus, suggesting that it's a universal path to spiritual growth.
It's about quieting all the mental chatter,
Yeah.
the constant stream of thoughts and desires that keep us distracted and disconnected from our true selves.
He seemed to believe that through meditation we could tap into a deeper source of wisdom and strength.
He talked about connecting with truth, with a higher understanding of life and our place in it.
And he emphasized that this isn't about running away from the world, it's about learning to engage with it more effectively.
His byways are all about finding peace and fulfillment within the context of our everyday lives.
It's a hopeful message, a message of empowerment. It reminds us that we have the power to create a more meaningful and fulfilling life for ourselves.
He's challenging us to take responsibility for our thoughts, our actions, and ultimately for the reality that we create.
It's a powerful message, and it's just as relevant today as it was when Alan first wrote these words.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to that interesting question you asked earlier. Why did a man who believed so strongly in the power of thought to shape reality remain relatively unknown?
It is a bit of a mystery, isn't it? You'd think if his ideas were so powerful, he would have been more well-known when he was alive.
It's easy to look at that and think it doesn't add up, but maybe it's more about how hard it is to really live by these principles.
So it's not that his ideas are wrong, it's just that putting them into practice all the time is a real challenge.
Exactly. Like, think about it. It's one thing to read about self-control or forgiveness,
Right.
but it's totally different to actually live that way every single day.
Right. Alan himself says this, right? He talks about those slavish animal indulgences that can mess up even the best of intentions. It's just so easy to slip back into old habits, to let our lower impulses take over.
It is.
Yeah.
And he doesn't make it sound easy to achieve true self-mastery.
Right.
He uses some pretty strong language, like talking about the need for long strife and self-discipline to get to that higher level of consciousness.
Right. So this journey of self-improvement isn't like a quick fix or a weekend seminar. It's like a lifelong commitment to working on yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why Alan's work wasn't more popular when he was alive. His message, while really insightful, might have just been too much for a lot of people to accept.
Yeah.
It asks us to be honest with ourselves and face our own flaws,
Right.
which can be pretty scary.
It's much easier to just stay stuck blaming our problems on our circumstances or other people than to take responsibility for our own thoughts and actions.
It is. But even though it's tough, Alan gives us a way out of those self-made traps. He wants us to become masters of our own minds, to align our thoughts and actions with that higher principle of truth.
And he gives us practical steps to do just that.
Right.
All those byways to blessedness we've been talking about: silence, solitude, self-reliance, forgiveness, sympathy, and finding joy in accomplishment. Those give us a guide for dealing with the ups and downs of life and finding more peace, purpose, and fulfillment.
He's reminding us that we have everything we need inside ourselves to create a better and more meaningful life. We don't have to wait for the outside world to change. We can start making those small, deliberate changes in our thoughts and actions right now.
It always comes back to that main idea: corn yields corn, nettles yield nettles.
Right.
What we put our attention on, what we nurture inside ourselves, that's what ends up shaping our lives.
And maybe in the end, that's the real impact James Allen had. Not fame or recognition, but his work that keeps inspiring and guiding people who are looking for a way to master themselves and live a more meaningful life.
It's a legacy that shows how powerful his ideas are. The fact that they still mean something today, even with all the distractions of our modern world.
Maybe the people who are really ready for his message, the ones willing to put in the work to live by his principles, they'll find their way to his work.
Yeah.
And in that way, his work will live on, quietly changing lives. One thought, one action, one byway at a time.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of James Allen. We hope you've learned something valuable and feel empowered to shape your own reality. We encourage you to keep exploring those byways to blessedness, keep working towards mastering yourself, and keep looking for that truth that's at the heart of a fulfilling life.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Better Every Day. We hope you found some actionable insights to help you on your self-improvement journey. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future deep dives. And if you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, small steps every day lead to big changes. See you next time.